Hrothgar is so thankful to God for Beowulf's bravery and called for his horse. They followed the monster's footprints, and it took them to narrow cliffs high above waters full of sea monsters. Hrothgar went in front with a few of his best trackers. Looking down, they saw that the water was red. They made their way down the cliff, and at the bottom, they were heartbroken to see Aesir dead. The water was full of blood, and there were monsters everywhere. They were in the water and on the rocky ledges. The men blew their battle horn, and the monsters got scared and were going back into the water. One was out of the water for a short while, but before it could go back down, the leader of the Geats shot it with an arrow. As the monster was in the shallows, the men stabbed it to death and dragged it to shore. It was such an incredible sight. Beowulf prepared to enter the battle. With his shining armor and bravery, he got ready to dive into the dirty waters. His breastplate would protect him against his enemies, and his helmet, covered in gold and built like in the old days, would stop any sword. But the mightiest of all in Beowulf's tools was the old, battle-tested sword that the men called Hrunting. Unfret, afraid to fight himself, lent it to Beowulf. The honor he lost was captured by Beowulf. Before jumping into the deep water, Beowulf turned to Hrothgar.
Remember what you said earlier, my king. If I lose the battle, you will treat me as a son. Take care of my men and send the treasures you gave me to High Gilak. Let him see what a kind king you are, and give the sword back to Unferth. With Huntring in my hand, I will achieve glory or death.
After that, Beowulf dove into the water and disappeared. It took Beowulf nearly all day to reach the bottom. Grendel's mother soon realized that someone from land has invaded her lair. She reached out and grabbed Beowulf, trying to tear him apart. She headed for the den, holding him so tightly he couldn't use his sword. There were different kinds of monsters trying to attack Beowulf. The nasty beast swam to some kind of underwater hall, an area kept dry by walls and the roof. A fire burned inside. Beowulf broke free from the beast's tight grip when he slashed her with his sword. The blade crashed against her skin, but nothing happened. She didn't get hurt. It was a powerful sword, yet it didn't hurt the evil beast. Beowulf tossed the sword aside and decided to use his bare hands, as he has done before. He grabbed Grendel's mother by the shoulder and knocked her down to the ground. She stood up again and knocked down Beowulf with her powerful claw. She took out a short sword and swung it at Beowulf, very determined to get back at him. The Geat's armor, however, was too strong, and the sword bent instead. He would have died if the sword hit him, but God decided to make him live. Armor and swords from previous victims were all over the place. Beowulf noticed a special sword that was believed to be the best blade ever made. It was a weapon made by and for giants. An ordinary man couldn't even lift it. He took the sword quickly and swung it wildly. It caught her neck, and it cut through her skin and shattered her bones. Beowulf was proud of his work. Suddenly, the hall was filled with light. He looked around and found Grendel's body lying around. He strode up to the head and took it. The water near the shore were full of blood. The other men has believed the monster has won, since it's been 9 hours since Beowulf dove in. Some of them, including Hrothgar, began to make their way back home. The Geats, however, waited for their leader to return from the bloody sea. Down below, the sword Beowulf used started to melt. It was the effect of the blood of the monsters. The monster's den was full of treasures, yet only Grendel's head and the jewel-covered hilt of the melted sword is what Beowulf took. He swam to the surface. The water was getting lighter as the evil influence of Grendel's mother wore off. As Beowulf surfaced, his men were overjoyed to see him and thank God for saving their brave leader. They helped Beowulf take off his armor and they started to go back to Heorot. Grendel's head was so heavy that 4 of them had to carry it. They marched all together to Heorot, with Beowulf in the middle. As they went into the hall, with Grendel, dragged by the hair, everyone inside eating and drinking were amazed.
Hrothgar, we have brought you this treasure from the sea. I almost died getting it. I fought hard and would have lost my strength if God didn't protect me. Hunting is a good sword, but it had failed me. Thankfully, God led me to another sword, an old sword of the giants. I used it to kill the beast in the evil den. I have made the monsters repay for the deaths of the Danes. Everyone in Heorot can sleep safely now.
Beowulf handed the hilt to Hrothgar, making it the most prized possession of the Danish princes. It showed that evil has once troubled them. He studied the hilt, which showed the story of how giants were cut off from the Lord.
Beowulf, you were born for glory. Your name is known everywhere. You have both strength and wisdom. I repeat my promise of friendship, and I know you'll be a great gift to your people for years to come. Our former king, Heremod, was different. He brought suffering to the people. He was bloodthirsty and violent. He grew too proud, and he thinks nothing can harm him. When this happens, it is as if he is shot in the heart by a demon. Learn a lesson from this. Once this happens, he becomes greedy. He forgets everything and ignores signs about his coming doom. He eventually dies, and his riches spread out among his people. Don't be like him, Beowulf. Keep your pride in check. Death will even come for you. I've ruled the Danes for half a century and I protected them from every evil. It began to seem that nothing could harm us. My sense of security disappeared when Grendel first entered the hall. Thank God I can look upon this sliced head. Please, Beowulf, sit and eat. Tomorrow you will receive lots of treasure.
With his warriors eager to come home, Beowulf went to Hrothgar.
We plan to go home now. You have been wonderful hosts, and we hold you dear to our hearts. If there's anything else I can do for you, I am ready. If you are troubled with war, I will cross the sea with thousands of warriors to fight by your side. Hygelac is young, but I have faith that he will support me if ever you need our assistance. If your son, Brethric, comes to Geatland, he will be among friends. Any land is happy to welcome a brave man.
Hrothgar replied,
The wisdom of your words must be a gift from God. I've never heard such thoughts from someone so young. You are strong in body and in mind. If ever your king should fall in battle or through sickness, the Geats will not find a better man than you. If you would be willing to be their protector, your mind pleases me the more I'm with you, dear Beowulf. You have made sure that the Geats and the Spear Danes will be close friends. As long as I am king, our treasures will be shared. Our warriors will greet each other happily, and we will send signs of our love across the seas. Our people will keep to the true olden customs. Then Hrothgar gave Beowulf 12 treasures and told him to be safe in his journey home and to return soon. In tears, Hrothgar embraced Beowulf.
The old man couldn't shake the feeling that they would never see each other again, and Beowulf was so dear to him that this fear brought the king to tears. Beowulf strode to his ship, and he and his men departed. On the journey, they praised Hrothgar's goodness repeatedly. He would be a great king until time defeated him, as it always does. The Geats passed by the guard at the shore. He called out a greeting to them as they loaded their treasure aboard the ship. Beowulf gave a jeweled sword to the man who guarded the boat. This gift earned the man much respect in the beer hall. The Geats headed out into the ocean, leaving Denmark behind. They sailed straight on to Geatland and soon were in sight of their homeland. The Geats' coast guard have been waiting and watching for them. The guard anchored the ship to the shore so that the winds wouldn't carry it away. Beowulf and his men unloaded the treasure. They were taking it to Hygelac's home, which was not far from the shore. The house was a grand one, fit for a heroic king. Hygelac lived there with his wife, Hyg, who was young for a queen, but thoughtful and generous. She was the opposite of Queen Modred of olden days, who would have any man killed who dared to look at her in the face. That is not how a queen should behave, even if she is beautiful. But as the legend goes, Modred was not as cruel after she was married off to the great Prince Offa. He was one of the mightiest warriors of all. Beowulf hurried to the hall. Hygelac soon heard of the return of the hero and ordered that the hall be made ready to welcome him. Hygelac greeted his loyal warrior, and the two men sat down together. The king wanted to know all about Beowulf's adventure.
How did it all turn out, Beowulf? You left here so quickly, hurrying to help destroy the evil that I plagued Heorot. Were you successful? Did you help Hrothgar? I was heartsick at your absence. I didn't want you to go after that slaughtering monster. I wanted you to let the Danes take care of Grendel themselves. Thank God.
After a short greeting from Hygelac, Beowulf started to tell him the story of his battle.
Freya Waru, Hrothgar's daughter, was there as well, handing around the ale cup. She is supposed to be married to Froda's son. That union will hopefully help his people, the Hedobards, and the Danes put aside their old feud. But even the most beautiful bride cannot stop the spears if violence arises. Think about it. When the Danes and Hedobards are together at the wedding feast, someone will no doubt remember the old fighting. The Hedobards will see the treasure that the Danes took from them the last time they battled, and one of them, most likely an old man who remembers the past well, will urge them to renew their feud, and then all of their promises of friendship will be worth nothing. I don't hold much hope for lasting peace between the Hedobards and the Danes. But enough of that. When the sun had set, Grendel came to the hall to attack us. The monster killed Honshu, but that was the only man he got, because the next one he tried to attack was me. He carried a string pouch made of dragon skin, and he tried to stuff me in there. I sprung free before he could get me. It would take a long time to tell you every detail of the fight, but with that battle I earned glory for your people. Grendel ran away, but his arm stayed behind in Heorot, where I tore it off. He died at the bottom of his swamp. The next morning, the Skildlings gave me a lot of treasure as a reward for my victory. There was a banquet with a lot of music and good cheer. The king and the other old men entertained every tale about the ancient days. We feasted that way for the entire day. That night, however, Grendel's mother came to get back at us. She killed Aesir, Hrothgar's closest friend, and took him back to her lair. That made Hrothgar very sad, who then asked me to go kill the she-wolf who took his friend. So, as many men already know, I dove into the water where she lived. We fought for a long time down there, and the waves were full of blood. I found a sword in her lair that I used to kill her. Hrothgar gave me many gifts for this feat. Hrothgar kept his word and practiced the old customs. He He gave me many gifts, all of which I am happy to offer you, my lord.
Beowulf had his men bring forward the splendid weapons and armor he got from Hrothgar.
Hrothgar gave me all of this, and he asked me to tell you that it used to belong to his brother, Hrothgar, king of the Scyldings. Hrothgar did not give it to his son, even though that man, Hereward, was quite brave, and now it is yours to enjoy.
Beowulf also gave 4 armored horses to his king. This is how kinsmen should behave to each other. They should be kind to one another. Hygelac was Beowulf's uncle, and the 2 men looked out for each other. Beowulf also gave Hygelac's wife the beautiful necklace he had received from Wilthau, along with 3 horses. That necklace must have shone brightly on the queen. By doing these things, Beowulf showed that he was not only brave, but honorable as well. King Hygelac gave Beowulf a glorious sword for everything he has done. In later years, Hygelac was killed in battle, and Hardred, his heir, was unable to protect the people. So Beowulf became their king. For 50 years, he was a wise and good ruler. But then evil came to Beowulf's land in the form of a dragon. The dragon had many treasure in its cave in the mountains. Somehow, a man found his way into the cave and stole a fancy cup while the dragon was sleeping. For this crime, the people would all suffer. The thief had not gone to the dragon's lair on purpose, and he didn't mean to steal the fancy cup. He was a slave who had run away from his cruel master and used the cave as a hiding place. He was examining the treasure when the dragon appeared, and it scared him so much that he ran out while still holding the fancy cup. The treasure had been left there by an ancient lord. He was the last of his kind, and after all his friends died, he had only his treasure to keep him company. He eventually died, and all the treasure there remained unused. The dragon was cursed to guard the treasure. It stayed there for 300 years before the old runaway slave stumbled in. He took the fancy cup back to his master, hoping to win his master's favor, and the master and his men returned to take as much of the treasure as they could. When the dragon woke up, it saw the footprints leading through its cave. It began searching for the thief, attacking and burning everything in its sight. The people suffered, though soon enough their king would suffer as well. The dragon burned homes throughout the land, scaring the people. It killed everyone it saw and cut a path of destruction throughout the Geats' land. Every day at dawn, it returned to its cave, where it felt safe. Then the dragon burned down Beowulf's home, the throne room of the Geats. It was a heavy blow to the old man. He was very upset. The dragon destroyed the Geats' forts and defenses along the coast, but Beowulf began to plan his revenge. Beowulf ordered his blacksmiths to make a mighty shield. He and the dragon were destined to end their lives together. Beowulf thought it would be shameful to go after the dragon with a whole army. He had fought plenty of difficult battles on his own since the time that he killed Grendel and his mother. He had wrestled with monsters and won. One of those battles was the one that took the life of Hygelac, the former king. After that battle was over, Beowulf swam through the sea wearing 30 sets of armor, which was the plunder he took from the war. None of his enemies would dare to face him after that. When he returned from that war, Queen Hygd offered Beowulf the kingdom. She didn't believe her son Hardred could be a good king and keep the Geats safe, but Beowulf couldn't be convinced to take over. Instead, he assisted and advised Hardred until Hygelac's son grew up and was able to protect the Geats. About that time, some exiles from the wars in Sweden came, and Hardred gave them shelter. But the Swedes came looking for the exiles, and in the battle, Hardred was killed. Onela took the throne in Sweden, leaving Beowulf to become a great king for the Geats. He was a good king. Beowulf immediately avenged Hardred and ended the feuding in Sweden by killing Onela. Thus, he showed his ability to survive dangerous situations time and again, until the day came when fate forced him to battle the dragon. Beowulf took 11 of his men and went in search for the dragon. They met up with the man who took the fancy cup out of the dragon's cave, and Beowulf learned the whole story of how the dragon's rage was awoken. This man joined their war party and led them to the dragon's cave. Beowulf spoke to his men before leading him in. Fate had brought him to the place of his death, and his speech was very dark. Beowulf rose and climbed up the face of the cliff toward the dragon's cave. He did not try to sneak in like a coward. He soon saw a stone arch with a stream of fire leading out of it. It would be dangerous to enter that way because of the flames. He cried out with anger, a shout that woke the dragon within. Any chance of peace was over now. The dragon's poisonous breath came pouring out of the lair. Beowulf raised his shield and his sword. Both he and the dragon were mad, but both was afraid of the other. Beowulf stood his ground as the dragon charged. His shield was not as strong as he wished. That was the first time he had battled, and fate had denied him glory. Beowulf swung his sword. The dragon screamed beneath the king's blow, but the blade was not as strong as Beowulf had hoped. The sword had not cut through the dragon. For the first time, it had failed. Beowulf had to give up his ground and move, just as all men must give up their lives. They clashed again. The dragon boldly struck out at the king and surrounded him in flame. Beowulf's men had retreated to the woods to save their lives. Only one man remained to fight with Beowulf, a man whose feeling of kinship came through strongly, as it always does in noble men. That man's name was Wiglaf. He saw that Beowulf was surrounded by flames, and he remembered all of the good things his king had done for him. Wiglaf carried an ancient sword. Wiglaf charged into battle, and that great sword did not break, as the dragon soon discovered. Wiglaf called out to his comrades, "I remember when we were in the mead hall, and we promised to bring Beowulf swords and armor if he needed them. He picked us to join him out of all his soldiers because he believed we were good with our swords. Though he told us to let him fight the dragon himself, he needs us now. Let us help him. With God as my witness, I'd rather die in the fire than go back home still carrying my weapons. It would be a terrible shame if we let our king die and we all survived. My sword and armor will be enough for both of us." Wiglaf approached Beowulf and said, "Be brave, dear Beowulf, as you were in your youth. Defend yourself, great warrior. I will stand by your side." The dragon heard Wiglaf and came roaring forward, its breath flaming. Wiglaf's shield burned away, and his armor was almost useless, but he managed to get behind Beowulf's shield. Beowulf came back to action by the thoughts of glory that Wiglaf had inspired. He swung the sword with all his might and drove it into the dragon's head. The sword broke. It is said that Beowulf could not use swords in battle, because he was too strong and broke them all. The dragon jumped forward and bit Beowulf on the neck, causing it to bleed a lot. It was at this moment that Wiglaf's bravery revealed itself. Even though his hand was badly burned, he drove his blade into the dragon's stomach. Its fiery breath weakened. Beowulf regained his strength. He pulled out his knife and stabbed at the dragon's side. The blow was fatal. Together, the two brave men had killed the beast. This was the last act of glory the king would ever perform. The dragon's poison ran through his blood. He walked out of the lair and sat at the edge of the cliff. Beowulf looked up at the cliff, face. The giant stones had held up the earth for ages. Wiglaf approached and washed his king's wound. Beowulf knew that his life was ending. Despite his wound, he spoke to the loyal Wiglaf. I would have liked to give my armor to my son, if only fate have given me one. I have ruled the Geats for 50 years. No other king would dare challenge me. I focused on our own affairs and did not seek out wars or troubles, and I never broke a promise. Even though I am dying, the thought of all of this is a comfort. I never killed my kinsmen and have nothing to fear from the ruler of mankind. Go and look at the treasure while the dragon is dying, dear Wiglaf. I want to see those beautiful jewels before I die. It will make my death easier to see that treasure and think of my long rule. Wiglaf went into the lair. He saw jewels and gold shining all over the place. There were ancient goblets and helmets, as well as beautiful jewelry of all kinds. Any man can lose great treasure, no matter how well he hides it. Wiglaf saw a beautiful banner hanging on one wall. It was so bright that it allowed him to see all around inside the lair. The dragon was dead. Wiglaf filled his arms with treasure and ran back out to Beowulf, hoping that his king would be alive. Beowulf was bleeding to death. Wiglaf splashed him with water to revive him. I thank God for being able to see such treasure, Beowulf said, and for being able to give it to my people when I die. I've traded my life for this treasure. Look after the needs of my people. I will not be here much longer. After my funeral pyre has burned, build a mound in my name so that people would pass under it and remember me. They would call it Beowulf's Barrow. Beowulf removed his necklace, helmet, breastplate, and ring and gave them to Wiglaf. You are the last of the Wigmunding family. Fate has taken all of mine to the land of doom, and now I join them. Those were the last words he said. It was difficult for Wiglaf to watch Beowulf die, but his killer was dead as well. Blades has ended its life and made sure that it wouldn't haunt the land any longer. There are few men, even amongst the bravest, who would dare face a dragon's fire and poisoned breath. Beowulf paid for the dragon's treasure with his life, but he killed every enemy he ever fought. The other men approached. They had been too afraid to come to Beowulf's aid, and now they were ashamed. They saw Wiglaf sitting beside their dead king, trying to revive Beowulf. It was too late. He could not bring that great warrior back from where God had taken him. The Lord's will rules over every man. Cowardly men looked at Wiglaf's grim face. He looked up at them and said, Anyone can see that all of the gifts Beowulf gave you were a waste. You threw away the honor he showed you when you refused to help him. Our king would have no reason to brag about his men, but God favored him by helping him to kill that dragon with his own sword. There wasn't much I could do to help him, but I did the little that I could. I weakened the dragon by stabbing it with my sword. It's a shame that I was the only one to help. Now all of my treasure will be useless to you. Men will lose their feelings of loyalty to you, and your lands will become deserted. It's better for a warrior to die than to live a life of shame. Wiglaf ordered that the news of the battle be spread to the men who had camped nearby, so they wouldn't be left wondering what happened.
The king of Geats is dead. His body rests beside that of the dragon he killed. Wiglaf sits beside Beowulf's body with a heavy heart. Our people can expect war to come now that our great protector is dead. The same thing happened when Hygelac was killed. The warriors heard the sad news and went to the cliff to see the horrible sight. They saw their leader's body stretched out, cold and dead.
Near it they saw the horrible dragon, which they measured at 50 feet. It had soared through the night once, but its journeys were over now. Next to the dragon's body was a pile of old and decaying plates, cups, and swords. The golden treasure was under a spell that prevented any man from entering the innermost part of the dragon's lair. The man who hid his treasure made a bad decision. The dragon killed him, and it took many deaths before the feud was settled. Even the mightiest man does not know how his life will end. That was the case for Beowulf. He did not know whether this battle with the dragon would be his last. The treasure had been cursed, so that those who tried to steal it would suffer. But Beowulf did not look at it with greedy eyes. He wanted it only for his people. Wiglaf spoke. One man's decision can bring suffering to many. That has happened to us here. Our king did not take our advice not to fight that dragon alone. He died for it and earned this treasure, but we cannot enjoy it because of the sad way it came to us. I went into the den and brought back all the treasure I could carry to Beowulf. He was still alive then. He asked that you build a memorial mound for him. He deserved such a mound because he was the mightiest warrior of all. I will take you into the lair so that you can see this amazing treasure, and let's build that pyre so that we could send our beloved king to God. Wiglaf ordered that wood be brought from the nearby homes in preparation for Beowulf's funeral. Fire will carry away our brave lord, who stood his ground amidst the flying arrows until one finally hit home. He took the 7 best men that were left and went into the dragon's den. He carried a torch to light their way. The men did not fight about who got to take the treasure, as there was so much of it lying there unguarded. They carried it out easily. The men pushed the dragon's body off the cliff and into the sea, where it sank into the waves. Then they carried the treasure and to their king to the throne nest. They built a large funeral pyre and covered it with armor, just as Beowulf had asked. With heavy hearts, they laid their leader on top. The sound of the crackling fire mixed with the cries of the people gathered there. Beowulf's body collapsed into the flames. An old widow stood nearby, crying. She mourned her lord and warned of the evil days to come. As the smoke disappeared into the sky, they started building a mound of earth. It took them 10 days to complete it. They surrounded it with a wall and buried the treasure within the mound. 12 knights rode around the memorial mound. They sang the praises of their departed lord and told of his bravery. It is good for men to praise their masters when they leave this earth.